This is a reading from the Virgin Mary in the writings of Maria Valtorta by Father Gabriel M. Roschini. The mode of Mary's association with Christ. To complete the explanation of Mary's intimate and indissoluble association with Christ's person and the whole work of humanity's redemption, we should examine Valtorta's writings to see what they indicate about the mode of that association. Just as Eve was one with Adam in their fall from grace, so Mary, the new Eve, was one with Christ, the new Adam, in redeeming the human race. This is the so-called principle of revenge, in which redemption overturned the fall from grace. The revenge of God, Poema 1, page 35. Jesus says to his mother, "I will take with you my revenge over Satan." Poema 1, page 34. Footnote 102. This revenge principle was taught by Innocent III, PL 217, 581 FF, also by Pius XII, and a great number of popes. See G. Roschini, Maria Santissima nella Storia nella Salvezza, Most Holy Mary in the History of Salvation, Volume 1, page 191 to 196. Jesus says, the pair Jesus-Mary is the antithesis of the pair Adam and Eve. Jesus and Mary were set apart to cancel Adam and Eve's entire work. They were set apart to restore humanity to the state it was in when it was created, rich in grace and all the gifts lavished on it by the Creator. Humanity has been totally regenerated by the work of the pair Jesus-Mary, who have thus become the new prototypes of humanity. All of time before that has been cancelled. Time and human history now revolve around the time when the new Eve drew the new Adam out of her inviolate womb. This was a turning round of creation, thanks to the work of the Lord God. After they sinned, Adam and Eve found themselves stripped of the infinite riches that God the Father had bestowed on them. Their doing caused mortal infirmity, perpetual mutilation, and impoverishment, and worse yet, spiritual destitution. In order to annul that work of evil, the new Adam and the new Eve had to systematically counter everything that the old Adam and the old Eve had done. They had to obey to perfection. They had to humble and immolate themselves in their flesh, feelings, thinking, and will. They had to do this in order to accept everything that God wanted. They had to raise their purity to the point of absolute chastity. What was the flesh for us both, since we were pure? A veil of water over our triumphant spirits, a light breeze caressing our royal spirits. We were filled with love as no one else ever has been. We pushed love to the apex of perfection to fill, with our ocean of love, the abyss which Adam and Eve dug with their fake love. They loved themselves more than they loved God. Constantly, we had to do the very opposite of Adam and Eve's behavior. Mary must cancel Eve. Mary sees the second Cain, Judas. Mary knows that he is the Cain of her dear Jesus, the second Abel. She knows that the blood of the second Abel was sold by this Cain, and that it is as good as shed. Still, she does not curse him. She loves him and forgives him. She loves him and continuously calls him. Poema 9, page 305 to 308. Elsewhere, Jesus says, evil entered the world through a woman, and it was vanquished by a woman. The fruit of the woman disintoxicated men from Lucifer's mudslinging. Poema 10, page 42. Mary is the Eve of the new paradise. Poema 6, page 1109. The mode of Mary's association as the new Eve with the new Adam, Christ, was foretold in the famous prophecy called the Proto-Evangelium, Genesis 3, verse 15. Jesus is speaking to his apostles. It has been said that through a woman, goodness will come back into the world, just as evil through a woman has entered it, and Satan will be vanquished. Footnote 103. This is fitting, since he had used a woman, Eve, to overcome and ruin humanity. Since evil entered the world through a woman, it is just that goodness should re-enter it through the woman. What is at stake here is to cancel a page written by Satan. That is what the woman's tears will do. Also, since Satan will forever not stop shouting, the woman's voice will sing to drown his shouts. When? The apostles ask. In truth, I tell you, her voice has already come down from heaven, where from everlasting Her Alleluia had already been sung. Will she be greater than Judith? Greater than any other woman. What is she doing? What is she going to do? What will she ever do? She will overthrow Eve and her triple sin. She will do that with her absolute obedience, absolute purity, and absolute humility. After that, she will stand up as a victorious queen. Poema 6, page 855. Elsewhere, the same thought is expressed in equivalent terms. The new Eve was conceived by the thought at the foot of the paradisiacal tree, apple tree, in order to put to flight the serpent and detoxicate the poisoned fruit by means of her smile and her tears. She became the tree of the redeeming fruit. Poema 3, page 469. I overcame Satan both in myself and in mankind, the Virgin Mary said to the seer. I have him underfoot. Quaderni 44, page 40, January the 10th. Also in Lezioni sull'Epistola di Paolo ai Romani, a commentary on St. Paul's epistle to the Romans, we can find a development of the classical antithetical parallel, Eve-Mary. Two altogether different voices, one from the peaks that stand in pure air and shine in the sun, the other from below, from the earth, from semi-darkness. God's voice is light, wisdom, and truth. Satan's voice is darkness, filth, and lies. The first Eve lowered her gaze and lent an ear to the voice of darkness, filth, and lies. The second Eve lent an ear to the voice of light, wisdom, and truth. The second Eve is the second Garden of Eden, where God has been pleased to talk with an innocent being in the cool of the evening, in the peace of a spirit that does not experience the fever and heat of lust. Because the first Eve wanted to be like God, she lost what makes of the human animal a child of God. But you, Mary, were not greedy in any way, since you wanted to be no more than a handmaid. You became divine. Footnote, see note 76 on page 107, editor. As a result of your betrothal with divine love and of your divine maternity. Lezioni sull'Epistola di Paolo ai Romani, a commentary on St. Paul's epistle to the Romans, chapter 16, pages 94 to 95. The human race experienced sin, suffering, and death through a woman's unfaithfulness. Through the faithfulness of the woman, the human race obtained regeneration, through grace and, as a result, forgiveness, pure joy, and life. Ibid, page 143. Eve's sin, Mary said to Valtorta, was a four-branched tree: pride, avarice, gluttony, and lust. These four branches produced the fruits of disobedience, and all four branches of Eve's sin were to be cut off before making the roots of the tree sterile. Poema 1, page 191. Mary reversed what Eve did by cutting these four branches. She cut the branch of pride. By deeply humiliating myself, Mary says, I defeated pride. I abased myself before everybody. What humiliation I had to suffer from men without defending myself in any way. Poema 1, page 191. She then alludes to her humiliations before Joseph the Just. They were the first of the infinite humiliations I was to suffer in my life as mother of Jesus and of mankind. Humiliations of poverty, of a refugee, humiliations for reproaches of relatives and friends who, being unaware of the truth, judged me a weak woman with regard to my behavior as a mother towards Jesus when he was a young man. Humiliations during the 3 years of his public life, cruel humiliations in the hour of Calvary, humiliation in having to admit that I could not afford to buy a place and the perfumes for the burial of my son. Ibid, page 192. She cut the branch of greed. I overcame the avarice of the first parents, renouncing my creature before the time. A mother never renounces her creature unless she is forced to, whether her heart is asked to renounce her creature by her country, or by the love of a spouse, or even by God himself. She will resent and struggle against the separation. It is natural. A son grows in our womb, and the tie that links him to us can never be completely broken. And a mother feels that tie, stretching even to exceedingly severe pangs, if the love of God, or of a creature, or the need of the country take her son away from her. And it breaks, tearing her heart, if death snatches her from her son. And I renounced my son from the very moment I had him. I gave him to God. I gave him to you. I deprived myself of the fruit of my womb to make amends for Eve's theft of God's fruit. Ibid, page 192. She cut the branch of gluttony. I defeated gluttony, both of knowledge and of enjoyment, by agreeing to know only what God wanted me to know, without asking myself or him more than what I was told. I believed unquestioningly. I overcame the innate personal delight of enjoyment because I denied myself every sensual pleasure. I confined flesh, the instrument of Satan, together with Satan, under my heel, and made of them a step to rise towards heaven. Heaven, my aim, where God was, my only hunger, a hunger which is not gluttony, but a necessity blessed by God, who wants us to crave for him. Ibid, page 192. She cut the branch of lust. I defeated lust, which is gluttony carried to the extreme of greed, because every unrestrained vice leads to a bigger vice, and Eve's gluttony, which was already blameworthy, led her to lust. It was no longer enough for her to enjoy pleasure by herself. She wanted to take her crime to a refined intensity, and thus she became acquainted with lust, and was a mistress of lust for her companion. I reversed the terms, and instead of descending, I have always ascended. Instead of causing other people to descend, I have always attracted them towards heaven. Of my honest companion, I made an angel. Since, after conceiving Jesus, I possessed God and his infinite wealth with him, I hastened to divest myself of it, saying, Here I am, may your will be done for him and by him. He is chaste, who chastises not only his flesh, but also his affections and his thoughts. I had to be the chaste one in order to annul the one who had been unchaste in her flesh, her heart, and her mind. And I never abandoned my reservedness, not even by saying of my son, He is mine, I want him, since he belonged only to me on earth, as he belonged only to God in heaven. And yet, all this was not sufficient to achieve for woman the peace lost by Eve. I obtained that for you at the foot of the cross. When I saw him dying, whom you saw being born, when I felt my bowels being torn apart by the cry of my dying creature, I became void of all femininity. I was no longer flesh, but an angel. Mary, the virgin spouse of the Spirit, died that moment. The mother of grace remained. Who gave you the grace she generated from her torture? The female, reconsecrated woman, by me, on Christmas night, achieved at the foot of the cross the means to become a creature of heaven. This I did for you, depriving myself of all satisfactions, even of holy ones. And whereas you had been reduced by Eve to females not superior to the mates of animals, I made of you, if you only wish so, saints of God. I ascended for you, as I had done for Joseph. I lifted you higher up. The rock of Calvary is my Mount of Olives. From there I took my leap to carry to heaven the resanctified soul of woman, together with my flesh, now glorified, because it had borne the word of God, and had destroyed in me the very last trace of Eve. It had destroyed the last root of that tree with 4 poisonous branches, a root stuck in the sensuality that had dragged mankind to fall, and that will go on biting at your intestines until the end of time, and to the last woman. Poema 1, page 192 to 93. Eve, together with Adam, ruined the world for the sake of pleasure. Mary, the new Eve, together with Christ, the new Adam, redeemed the world by suffering, the greatest, most unspeakable of all sufferings. To be mother of the Son of God is blissful, the Blessed Virgin says. To be mother of the Redeemer must be a destiny of deepest sorrow. I feel my weight of sorrow increasing from hour to hour, and I shall have to bear it all my life. And even if I do not see the details, I feel that it will be heavier than if the whole world were placed on my shoulders of a woman, and I were to offer it to heaven. I alone, poor woman. Poema 1, page 157. To say the Redeemer's mother is to say the woman of sorrows. Quaderni 43, page 642, December the 8th. I, who was the innocent one, the Blessed Virgin says, had to know also sorrow and sadness, because I was the co-redeemer. Poema 1, page 153. Actually, suffering is a consequence of the original fault. Since the Blessed Virgin was exempted from original sin, we might expect that she would have been exempted from suffering also. However, as co-redemptrix, she was given over to suffering, so much so that she could say, "I feel as if my heart were wrapped in burning thorns, and every time I breathe, I am pierced by them." Poema 4, page 718. Just as Eve and Adam ruined the human race by their disobedience, so the new Eve and the new Adam redeemed it by their obedience. Mary says, "Oh, the joy of removing from God's heart the bitterness of Eve's disobedience. I redeemed that sin by going up the same stages as they descended. Disobedience was the beginning of the downfall. Do not eat and do not touch of that tree, said God." Genesis chapter 2, verse 17. And man and woman did not respect that prohibition, although as kings of creation they were allowed to touch and eat of everything except of that tree, because God wanted them to be inferior only to angels. The tree, the means to test their obedience. What does obedience to God's commands imply? It implies all possible good, because God commands nothing but good. What is disobedience? It is evil, because it brings about a rebellious mental state in which Satan can be active. Eve goes towards the tree, which, if avoided, would have caused her welfare, if approached, would cause her ruin. She goes there led by the childish curiosity of seeing what is special about it, and by a rashness that makes her consider God's command a useless one, since she is strong and pure, the queen of Eden, where everything is subject to her, and nothing can hurt her. Her presumption is her ruin. Presumption is the yeast of pride. At the tree she finds the seducer, who sings his song of lies to her inexperience, to her beautiful, virginal inexperience, to her badly guarded inexperience. You think there is evil here? No, there isn't. God told you because he wanted to keep you as slaves under his power. You think you are king and queen? You are not even as free as wild animals. Animals can love one another with true love. You cannot. Animals are granted the gift of being creators, like God. Animals generate little ones and see their families grow as much as they like. You do not. You are denied this joy. Why make you man and woman if you have to live thus? Be gods. You do not know the joy of being two in one flesh that creates a third one and many more. Do not believe God when he promised you the joy of posterity, seeing your children forming new families, leaving their father and mother for their families. He has given you a sham life. Real life is to know the laws of life. Then you will be like gods, and will be able to say to God, "We are equal to you." And the allurements continued because there was no will to break it. On the contrary, there was the will to continue it, and to learn what did not belong to man. And the forbidden tree becomes really mortal for the human race, because from its branches there hangs the fruit of bitter knowledge that comes from Satan. And the woman becomes a female, and with the yeast of satanic knowledge in her heart, she moves on to corrupt Adam. With their bodies and souls degraded, and their morals corrupted, they became acquainted with the sorrow and death of both their souls deprived of grace, and of their bodies divested of immortality. And Eve's wound engendered suffering, which will not subside until the last couple on earth are dead. I went along the road of the two sinners, but in the opposite direction. I obeyed in every way. God inspired me to be a virgin. I obeyed. When I loved virginity that made me as pure as the first woman before she met Satan, God asked me to get married. I obeyed, elevating marriage to the degree of purity intended by God when he created the first parents. I was then convinced that my destiny was solitude in marriage and people's contempt because of my holy sterility. When God asked me to be a mother, I obeyed. I believed that it was possible and that the word came from God because I was filled with peace when I heard it. I did not think I deserved it. I did not say, "Now the world will admire me because I am like God, creating the flesh of God." No, I did not. I lowered myself in my humility. Joy gushed out of my heart like the stem of a rose, but it was soon decorated with sharp thorns, and it was clenched in the tangle of sorrow, like branches enveloped by bare-binds of convolvuli. Footnote 105. A genus of climbing plants, including the bindweed. This note is found in the English edition of Il Poema dell'Uomo Dio, translator. Sorrow for the pain of my spouse, it suffocated my joy. Sorrow for the pain of my son, a thorn that pierced my joy. Eve wanted pleasure, triumph, freedom. I accepted sorrow, humiliation, slavery. I gave up my peaceful life, the esteem of my spouse, my own freedom. I kept nothing for myself. I became the maid of God in the flesh, in morals, in the spirit, relying on him not only for the virginal conception, but also for the protection of my honor, for the consolation of my spouse, for the means suitable to elevate him also to the sublimation of marriage, so that we could restore man and woman to their lost dignity. I embraced the will of the Lord for myself, my spouse, and my creature. I said yes for the whole three, as I was certain that God would not break his promise to assist me in my sorrow of a spouse who realizes she is considered guilty, and of a mother who knows she is generating a son to deliver him to sorrow. I said yes, and nothing else. That yes canceled Eve's no to God's command. Yes, my Lord, as you wish. I will know what you want me to know. I will live as you want me to live. I will rejoice if you wish so. I will suffer for what you want me to suffer. Yes, forever. My Lord, from the moment your ray made me a mother to the moment you called me back to you. Yes, forever, yes. All the good voices of the flesh, all the good passions of the spirit were under the weight of my perpetual yes. And above, on a diamond pedestal, there was my spirit, lacking wings to fly to you. But it was the master of the whole ego, subdued and made your servant. Servant in joy, servant in sorrow. But smile, O God, and be happy. Guilt has been defeated. It has been removed and destroyed. It lies under my heel. It was washed in my tears and destroyed by my obedience. The new tree will be born on my bosom, and it will tear the fruit that knows all the evil, because it suffered it all in itself, and will give all the good. All men will be able to come to it, and I shall be happy if they take it of it, even if they do not remember that it was born of me, providing man is saved and God is loved. Let it be done to his handmaid, what is done to a clod of earth on which a tree is planted, a step to ascend. Poema 1, page 112 to 115. Jesus says, in order to give you back the grace lost by the disobedience of the first two human beings, two most pure, most innocent, and most good beings, Jesus and Mary, had to consummate supreme obedience. The salvation of the human race began in history with Mary's "Let it be done" in my archangel's presence. It was consummated when Jesus on the cross said, "It is accomplished." These were the two most painful acts of obedience, also the least compulsory, since my mother and I, who did not sin, were not obliged to expiate sin. We did nonetheless. We have redeemed your sin by obeying. Quaderni 43, page 294, August 29th. Valtorta commented that Mary, the sinless woman, suffering more than any other woman in order to be the co-redemptrix, Poema 6, page 1008. When she heroically said yes, Jesus explains, the heavens bowed and venerated the martyred redemptrix, Quaderni 43, page 618, December the 3rd. Little wonder Our Lady cried out, how difficult it is to be the mother of the Redemptor, Poema 4, page 879. Little wonder our Lord told Valtorta, you have seen how much it costs both of us to be saviors. You know what all our tortures were, and you have seen with how much generosity and strength we underwent them out of charity to save you. Footnote 106. The last you is in the plural. Editor. Quaderni 44, page 177, February 20th. Dictation on Jesus' Passion and Mary's Sufferings.